Now, you want to give us some advice on driving techniques in this cold snap, because not everything that is slippy is that easily visible.
Yeah, particularly this morning, Pat, the issue seems to be freezing fog. Now, the big problem with freezing fog is it contributes to the formation of black ice. And obviously, black ice is very hard to spot and it's highly dangerous for driving. So you almost need to assume that the roads are worse than they actually look. It also increases the risk of slippery spots on roads, bridges, bends, and reduces visibility. So this morning, make sure you have your front fog lights and your rear fog lights on. Slow down and just maintain a really, really big distance between you and the car in front, because then at least you can read the road. But slowing down is the big thing, really, Pat, because people get into difficulties because they're simply driving too fast for the road conditions. So just slow down and maintain a very big distance. That's my key advice to anybody on the road this morning.
Now, cars themselves are more advanced than they used to be with anti-lock brakes, but you can't necessarily depend on the anti-lock brakes in every dramatic situation.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think the key thing is if you do find yourself in difficulty and you start to skid, the advice is always to turn into the skid. So if you're skidding to the left, turn your steering wheel to the left or vice versa. But that advice normally goes out the window because people panic. So the important thing is don't panic. Take your feet off all of the pedals. And if you remember nothing else, just as I said, don't panic, but turn the wheel in the direction you want to be travelling in.
Now, the problem is when you think about that, Ger, you're sliding towards the ditch and the advice is to point your steering wheel towards the ditch. And that's counterintuitive.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's why that advice goes out the window. But that is, if you can keep that in mind, turn into the skid. But as I said, if you don't, I mean, the big thing is prevention more than anything, Pat, is don't get yourself into a skid. Most serious skids result from simply driving too fast from the road for the road conditions, as I said. So try and use main roads. They're more likely to be gritted. If you can stay away from the back roads, be very careful in coming out of housing estates again, or sheltered areas. But just slow down, Pat. That's the big thing.
And then, of course, your screen washer, many people just have plain water in it, and that's likely to freeze overnight in the car. So you should have some solvent in that screen wash that will lower the freezing point so that you can still use it.
Yeah, and have spare screen wash as well. Make sure your mobile is fully charged when you're on the road. And also, just before you set off, make sure you can see clearly out from all of your windows, that your lights are working. And then I suppose the whole idea of maintenance in winter comes into play here, Pat. Like, you should be pre-prepared before the snow arrives for all of these things, and make sure that your tread depth on your tyres, I mean, the minimum is 1.6, but really for winter, you should be looking at 3 millimetres minimum. So they're the kind of things, but visibility is a big thing before you set off. So just ensure that you can see clearly out of all of your windows and mirrors.
Now, time was when a cold snap came that the internal combustion engine was so fraught with difficulties, with, frozen points and various things that would stop the car from starting. With electronic ignitions for the last ages, that's not a problem. But the better car for these kind of conditions is, as long as it's charged, is the electric car, because there's no water in there. There's nothing to stop the engine from functioning as normal.
Yeah, the other thing with those is the preconditioning aspect. So you can actually warm up your car while it's plugged in, and this heats the cabin and everything without actually using the power on your battery. I saw a lot of tweets about people laughing about people with EVs, and yet, as you point out, they're probably the ones that are most successful on the road at the moment. The only thing I would say about EVs you need to be careful of is that extra weight. If you do get into a skid, they can be quite difficult to control because they're that bit heavier. But again, slowing down is the key thing. But yeah, I mean, anybody with an EV is probably fine, provided it's not rear-wheel drive. They're not the most ideal cars to be driving in the ice at the moment.
Now, the other thing is, when you're slowing down in an EV, you may have regeneration going into your battery. And I'm not sure how many models, when you're using braking for regenerating power, which slows you down, do they indicate to the people behind? Do the brake lights come on if you just take your foot off the pedal and you then dramatically slow down?
Not always, Pat. So it depends on the car. Now, a lot of them do actually, they are linked to the back, but it would be a good idea to just give some indication. But again, the big thing there is the distance between you. If everybody's maintaining a decent distance, you can read the road ahead and you can tell when a car is slowing down, and you're not relying on brake lights to give you that indication. But yeah, that is something to bear in mind, is just to give some sort of indication to the person behind you that you're slowing down.